So yesterday, Donald Trump gave the green light to Turkey so that they can begin their invasion into Syria. More specifically, the Kurdish territories in the northern part of Syria. There are at least two major takeaways from this story. The first is basically everyone agrees at this point that if/when Turkey does this invasion into Kurdish territory, there will be massive casualties, massive civilian casualties. The second takeaway is this almost unquestionably is going to help ISIS in Syria. Now, before I get into that, let me give you some context into the beef between the Kurds and the Turkish government. This goes back hundreds of years to the Ottoman Empire. So the Ottoman Empire was one of the largest empires in human history. It was centered in what's now Turkey. That was where it started. And over hundreds of years, it expanded into parts of Europe and the Middle East, and I believe the northern part of Africa. Seeing how this was an empire, and it only was able to expand to such a size by militarily conquering people around them who couldn't defend themselves, there had always been ethnic and religious tensions within the Ottoman Empire. Now, at the end of World War I, the Ottoman Empire was broken up, and this began a whole other host of problems because now new lines and new borders were being drawn and new countries were being formed by Western powers, and all the different ethnic and religious minorities wanted to form their own sovereign independent countries, but that is not how it worked out. Borders were drawn fairly sloppily and mostly to serve the interests of Western countries, and they didn't really take into account the conflict and the infighting that would happen between these different groups. Well, in 1961, the borders of Syria were officially drawn up, and it became a country that shares a border with Turkey. But within the new borders of Syria were the Kurds, and they wanted their own state. They wanted their own official, sovereign, independent country, but they did not get that. They were under the rule of the Syrian government. And there have been dust-ups between the Kurds and Syria and the Kurds and Turkey. But the main goal of the Kurds has been to have their own independent state so that they aren't under the rule of these governments that don't prioritize the needs of this minority, the Kurds. And in recent years, things have been especially heated between the Kurds and the Turkish government because the Turkish government does not want the Kurds on their border. There's an argument to be made that they don't want the Kurds to exist at all. And in retaliation, you see resentment from some of the more violent factions within the Kurdish territories. And yes, over the years, some of the more violent factions within the Kurdish territories have been responsible for some brutal terrorist attacks in Turkey. So, like with most conflicts, it's pretty clear to see that nobody's hands are completely clean on this, but that doesn't mean that the responsibility is split 50-50 and both sides are equally responsible for where we are today. My general position on this remains consistent. In conflicts that we see like this happening around the world, whether it's what's happening with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or what's happening with India and Kashmir, or the situation right now between the Kurds and the Turkish government, when there's a religious or ethnic minority that's basically blocked in, caged in, living in terrible conditions, the side that's more responsible for the conflict is the side that has the overwhelming, unmatched might and military power. In this case, it's the Turkish government. And it's because the way these things play out, the ethnic religious minority that's blocked in and caged in, living in terrible conditions, all they usually ever want is independence, autonomy, and their own sovereign country that they can govern as they see fit without interference or intervention from other more powerful countries. But the aggressors, the side with the overwhelming military might, they want to come in and take what little these ethnic and religious minorities have. Whether it's because of greed or hatred, they think might makes right and they can do whatever they want because they have the power to do whatever they want. And these countries that are the aggressors, whether it's Israel or India, or in this case, Turkey, they have the power to end the conflicts if they wanted to. They can have negotiations. They can come to the table and say, look, we'll give you this. We'll stay out of your affairs. You stay out of our affairs. And it would be fairly ridiculous and stupid for the persecuted minorities to turn that down, this case being the Kurds. So if the Turkish government was actually serious about ending this conflict peacefully, they would come together with European countries and these Western countries and the United States, and they would broker some type of deal where they would give the Kurds an independent Kurdistan like they've been asking for to end the hostilities. But the Turkish government does not want to do that because, like I said, they want to take what little the Kurds have left. They either want their land or they just want to do an all-out genocide and kill all the Kurds. The Kurds have nothing left to give up to the Turkish government in negotiations. They can't negotiate anything. They can't give them anything. And what sense does it make to break off their territory then give it to an already well-off, well-established country like Turkey? That doesn't make any sense. So that's the backstory here. And now where we are today, it seems almost inevitable that the Turkish government is going to start an invasion into Kurdish territory at any time now. And human rights organizations are warning that this is going to be yet another massacre in the Middle East, an unnecessary, bloody slaughtering of civilians. And it seems like the Trump administration has greenlit this for no other reason but pure rank corruption. I'm sure Donald Trump got something out of this arrangement with the Turkish government, specifically Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, prime minister or dictator, whatever his title is right now. And this is particularly gross because the Kurds were the main ones on the ground fighting ISIS in Syria. They're the main ones who have beat back ISIS in Syria. They helped run them out of Raqqa and held their ground and kept them from getting into Turkey. If it wasn't for the Kurds, ISIS would definitely control a lot more land in Syria than they do right now. So we all sit back and watch while the Kurds put themselves on the line, fighting what's people agree to be one of the most brutal terrorist organizations on the planet right now. And the second we're done exploiting them and using them, we're going to turn around and not, honor a deal. And you know what? You guys have been advocating for an independent Kurdistan for a long time. You guys deserve it. You should be able to govern your own territory, have your own sovereign country with your own borders. So we are all going to come together, the U.S. government, Syria, Turkey, and we're going to make sure we broker some type of deal to give you your own country. Instead of doing that, we're going to turn around and stab them in the back and greenlight a fucking genocide, because that's what Erdogan is about to do, a genocide, because he has made his disdain for the Kurds very clear for a very long time. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that he wants to wipe them off the face of the earth. So, as a result of this, ISIS will definitely benefit. There will be a resurgence of ISIS in Syria. And when it happens, everyone is going to be looking around shocked and chagrined and appalled and act like this just came out of nowhere. But in reality, we just put a target on ISIS's main opposition within Syria right now. And you can just add this onto the endless list of ways that we have aided and abetted what we claim to be our main enemy in Syria, ISIS. We helped them get their start with the invasion of Iraq because after we overthrew Saddam's government and exiled his military generals, they went and teamed up with jihadists that they found in the Middle East and formed terrorist groups like ISIS. And so we gave them their leadership. On top of that, almost all the weapons that they have come from the United States and Saudi Arabia. We left millions and millions of dollars worth of U.S. weapons just laying around in Iraq. There were some reports of just warehouses abandoned with U.S. military equipment for anybody to just come in and take. On top of that, there are reports of U.S. The military doing supply drops of weapons to our allies in the region or to some U.S. bases, and those airdrops fall into the hand of ISIS fighters. So they've just intercepted some of our weapons. They've managed to buy U.S. weapons on the black market. And of course, they also get weapons from Saudi Arabia. The weapons that we give Saudi Arabia, the weapons and funding we give Saudi Arabia, they turn around and give to ISIS. So no one, I repeat, almost no one is more responsible for the reign of terror ISIS has caused in Syria and throughout the Middle East than the United States and Saudi Arabia. And here we go again, adding to the list of how we aid and abet jihadists and terrorists so that they can run roughshod through the Middle East. So I guarantee this is not going to be the last time you hear about this story. I don't know how far Erdogan wants to take this. I highly, highly doubt after he very likely takes over Kurdish territory, what's now Kurdish territory, he is not going to stop there. He will likely continue his incursion into Syria, and I don't know what will stop him, but this is the current state of affairs. Corrupt as all hell, irrational, incoherent, diabolical, and genocidal.